The Genesis Venom, written by Merijn Craane. The woman awoke, the sharp white lights of the room burning through her eyelids into her retinas. She groggily gazed around. The anesthetic forced upon her had not fully worn off yet, and probably wouldn't for a while. As she took in her surroundings, she almost couldn't believe what she saw. Perfect, sterile white tiles covered the entire room. The uncomfortable lights left not even an afterthought of a shadow anywhere, as if ripped straight from a horror movie. The entire room felt like it had no right to exist. In her mind, she felt disbelief that such a place could exist outside of fiction. Watching those kind of movies, she had never doubted that they did exist somewhere in the world. Surely they were inspired by some room, maybe inside asylums or tucked away in the bowels of hospitals or research labs. To witness such a place and be inside it felt like living in her very own horror movie. It was only after she had taken in the full extent of the room that she realized her arms and legs were bound, and she wasn't alone. In the far corner of the room stood a man with a strong figure and a large build, and most terrifying of all, empty eyes that felt grey and unmoving, like those of a blind man, yet fixed right on her. He wore an attire that could easily be mistaken for a butcher's garb, and felt more medical in purpose. It was completely clean. He stood unmoving in the corner, like a statue. She struggled against her binds and found them impossible to move, tightened and reinforced for someone much stronger than her. The chair, too, a steel medical thing, was bolted firmly to the ground. She looked up at the man. Where am I? She asked, scanning the man again for any reaction, but he remained silent. She waited for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Every second that passed, she felt more disturbed. The full extent of her situation grew on her as the anesthetic wore off even more. She couldn't struggle against her binds. The metal studded leather would just cut into her arm. However much she thought, she couldn't determine the purpose of her being there. There was nothing in the room besides her, the chair and the man. Nothing that could give any clue of why she was there. Then, suddenly, a voice spoke, distorted and mechanical, as if through a speaker announcement system. Miss Smith, excellent. You are awake, the voice said, its tone neutral and matter of fact. Where am I? Who are you? She yelled before being cut off by the voice again. We do apologize for the anesthetics dosage, but your reports say that you were quite the troublemaker, and we wanted to ensure ease of transportation. It said, not acknowledging her question. It was a man's voice, casual and light. Why, why did you bring me here? What are you going to do? She asked. Her voice raised in an attempt to have her question answered. To her surprise, the voice did. I am sorry, Miss Smith. We are on a need-to-know basis, and you do not need to know. All I will say is that after today, your days in prison are numbered, and you will be free to live your life. Firstly, however, we wish to ask you a few questions. She grew slightly more hopeful. Only a few questions, she thought, her mind skipping over the fact that one shouldn't have to be restrained to be asked a few questions. Firstly, we would like to review your record, the voice continued. Homicide, or rather, patricide. Interesting, the voice said pensively. He deserved it, she blurted out without thinking. Miss Smith, from now on, please only speak when we specifically ask you to. The process will go much smoother that way, it said, pausing as if thinking about its next word. Additionally, we do not concern ourselves with the justice of the committed act. We are aware of the abuse you and your mother were subject to, but such things matter little to the current circumstance. The act of killing your father was committed. Such is fact, and such is the only thing important currently. But if it eases your mind, we do not judge you. It is in your human nature, after all. At those last words, she detected a slight change in the voice's tone, its neutral demeanor changing at the word human to something almost vitriolic. She thought for a second about its first word. She had no reason to obey its request, but simultaneously she had no desire to speak up against it. It felt weird. Normally she'd be all too glad to take any chance to get in the last word, but now she felt little want to. Well then, Miss Smith. Let's recount the events that led you here. Throughout your youth, your father was frequently abusive towards you and your mother. This led you, at the age of 18, to kill him. The method, better still, but it states here you used a common kitchen knife to penetrate his neck, severing his vital airway and eventually suffocating him. Must have been quite the sight, watching him squirm on the ground, gasping for air while blood gushed from the wound. She looked up angrily at where she thought the voice came from. A speaker, probably hidden behind one of the hundreds of white tiles lining the wall. That was a question, Miss Smith. Why are you so interested in this? You already said you didn't care about the justice of it, she remarked, annoyance clear in her voice. You are right, Miss Smith. We do not care about the justice. But the question wasn't about justice. We simply wanted to inquire about your feelings towards the matter. Although the righteousness of it doesn't matter, what you felt during the moment does matter. It matters very much to us. She contemplated that for a second. Many possibilities for why they wanted to know how she felt rushed through her mind. Did they want to find out if she felt guilty? Did they want to reevaluate her motives? Nothing felt certain, and the voice's unwillingness to diverge information didn't help. I, I don't know. I guess it felt good to finally have that bastard get what he deserved, she answered. We thank you for your candor, Miss Smith. A neighbor called the police, and upon their arrival, you turned yourself in. Court went smoothly, and with your confession, they allowed for a plea deal. You ended up in a federal prison and remained there for 4 years. Now, you are here. Is it all correct, Miss Smith? She saw it and nodded at the last question, having little energy for a more lengthy answer, but also to test something. Excellent. Then the report is all correct. So they could see her, she thought. All right. We are coming up on the last two questions. A silence hung in the air as she looked up, waiting. Finally, the voice spoke again. Do you believe in God, Miss Smith? In the report, it states you are a registered Christian, but that was years ago. Frankly, I doubt the validity of that entry. The only person who could answer that question is, well, you, Miss Smith. I, I she stammered, caught off guard by the rudeness and strangeness of the question. I don't know, she managed. Do any of us truly? The voice said, more quickly this time. All right, final question. Do you believe that we, humanity, were made in a certain way and that throughout the years of our existence we have stayed true to that original form? Or rather, do you believe that along the way something occurred that changed us irrevocably? The last word hissed across the room. If she was taken aback by the previous question, she was certainly surprised by this one. The silence in the room was almost tangible. Eventually she stammered, What? We do not require an answer from you, Miss Smith. We simply ask that you contemplate that question. As the words hung in the air, she heard a low hiss, as if the speaker system shut down. Silence returned to the room. She sat there, left to contemplate the words just spoken. Out of nowhere, the speaker came alive again, and the voice returned. One last thing. As the voice spoke, she got the feeling it wasn't meant for her. You may administer the antivenom now. Her eyes widened at that. A deep panic formed in her throat, and suddenly she had trouble breathing. Antive! She managed before the figure in the corner of the room moved, quick, with a speed and precision she wouldn't have imagined of a man of that stature. He moved beside her and reached for something behind her. A syringe entered her field of view, hidden behind her all this while. The man gave it one tap, and without warning, stuck it into her arm. She struggled as the white opaque liquid inside the vial entered her body. She tried to scream, but no sound came from her throat. Her eyesight got blurry, and she kicked against her binds, but it was to no avail. She couldn't have broken them before, and now, as she felt her body getting weaker, she definitely could not have broken them. Darkness enveloped her mind, and soon a shadow was cast over her eyes. The hazy world turned to solid black, and she saw nothing.